Hi everybody, Geo here. Today's story is from the other point of view of the hero on the bed. I like to write companion pieces like this because it forces you to get into the characters better. It's a lot of fun too. I'm not going to lie, even with this latest surgery, I'd give you a 50-50 chance of walking again, Dr. Stevens said to my dad while looking at the latest x-rays. I sat on a chair in the examination room as a nurse cautiously unwrapped the bandages from my dad's leg. He'd had another surgery on it just a week ago. And by the way the doc frowned, I don't think Dad's leg was healing like it was supposed to. My name's Rafael Corazon, 6'2", long brown pulled into a tail, and gauges and studs in my ears. Souvenirs from my wilder days. Was that only a year ago? I wore an old t-shirt I worked out in. I ripped the sleeves off, and the pants are so old they have holes and rips everywhere. It's also my last decent pair of pants. Everything else has holes in the wrong places. I turned away as the nurse unwound the last of the bandages. I couldn't help but look. The ugly black lines of the incision marks across my dad's knee haunted me. Dried blood crusted the edges where the wound had seeped a little. Blood doesn't make me queasy, nor injuries, but this did. I blew a breath out. My dad grunted a little. I found some music on my phone, plugged my earbuds in, and tuned out the conversation between the doc, the nurse, and my dad. My God, I whispered, and shut my eyes to get rid of the image. Why had life gone so wrong? Even though I tried not to look, I still saw the ugliness of my dad's surgery. My stomach shriveled, and I held my breath to keep the nausea down. "Excuse me," I said, and left the examination room. They had a drinking fountain just down the hall, and that's where I went. For the next 15 minutes, the doctor spoke with my dad, alone. Sometimes life was too much to deal with. My dad hobbled on his crutches out of the exam room. Though only 50, his hair had gray streaks and lines had formed around his eyes and mouth. This last year had aged him. "I want to see your dad in 2 days so we can change the dressing and see how it's healing," the doc said as he walked with us. "I'm updating your prescriptions with a stronger antibiotic and a painkiller. You'll take them every 4 hours until I see you again." That means I'll have to take more time off of work for the appointment. It'll be okay with my boss. I simply won't get paid for those 2 hours. "We'll stop off at the pharmacy as soon as we leave," I said, and forced a smile. "Come on, Dad. You have a date with your recliner." I pulled the car up as close to the doctor's office as I could, then helped Dad into the passenger seat. We drove to the pharmacy. "The new medications are how much?" There was no generic? Didn't the doctor realize we had no money? There goes getting some decent clothes. Would have to pay the copay for Dad's prescriptions. Pants would have to wait for next paycheck. "Rafael, I don't want to go home. At least not yet," Dad said. "Did you want to visit a drive-thru?" I asked. "No, I want to be around people and get away from the four walls. They're driving me crazy. My leg doesn't hurt as much." "Let's go to the mall," Dad said. "You are crazy. Who's the guy who just had surgery? Who's the guy that can barely walk? How do you expect to get around that place? Do you know how big it is?" I said. "The food courts are near some doors. I'll go in there, have a seat for a few minutes, then we can go home," Dad said. "It's lunchtime. We can get something to eat." Taking my dad anywhere in public with that leg gave me a headache. But I had to admit, it would feel good to get out of the four walls, even for a half an hour. "Fine, Dad." I pulled up to the curb closest to the food court entrance and helped Dad get over to a bench. Then I parked the car. Lunchtime on a Monday meant a mob around the food court. Gently, slowly, we walked into the mall. I pretended I didn't see Dad wince with each step. Some guy ran ahead of us and barged into the mall. He bumped my dad. Dad groaned. The guy only glanced back at us before disappearing. The other guy never even said sorry. "You'd think that somebody in this world would be nice," Dad muttered. I opened the door and helped Dad through it. Here in the open, his brace looked huge. I tried to help Dad through the crowds of people, but, as careful as we were, they still bumped him and his leg. This was a mistake coming here. I don't know how, but we found a vacant table near the edge of the food court, and I sat Dad down. Pale, arms shaking from the strain, he wouldn't make it back to the car unless I drove it inside the mall. "What do you want to eat?" I asked. Dad's mouth pressed flat and his shoulders tightened. My stomach nodded. "The leg again?" I asked. Dad didn't say anything. I brought a chair over and propped his leg up on it. I pulled out the pill container and read it. 1 every 4 hours. I guess 4 hours starts now. "I'll get you a drink. Don't move, Dad. What do you want?" "A cola and a wheelchair," he said. He ran a hand through his graying hair and tried not to look like he was in pain. I wandered around looking for the shortest line and the cheapest price. Lunchtime. All lines were long. I finally found Dad a drink, and I pushed my way through the crowd back to our table. A guy sat at our table, talking to Dad. Slender, blonde hair, blue eyes, dressed in a nice white polo and khaki slacks, a carefree smile, clean-shaven, and bright eyes. Somebody that life hadn't destroyed. Before I had to take care of Dad, I probably would have asked him out. Those days are long gone. This guy was so completely opposite me. I bet he didn't know how hard life can get. "What happened?" he asked. "Another knee surgery," I said. "I told you, Dad, that I should have taken you home, but no, you wanted to go to the mall. You said, 'I'm tired of seeing the same 4 walls all the time.' I've been laying around for too long. I want to see the world again," Dad said. "The world hasn't changed," I said. I set the drink down in front of my dad and handed him the bills. The new guy looked about the area. "Who's your friend?" I asked. "I thought he was one of yours," Dad said. Was Dad making a joke? He knew how lonely our lives were. He looked like he was in pain. I came to see if I could help. "I'm Blake." Blake. He was nice to look at. But the relationship wouldn't go anywhere. "That's my son, Raphael." "I'm Troy," Dad said. "There are still nice people," I said, catching myself. I almost said, "nice looking." I fumbled and said, "in the world." If life had been different. But that was just me wishing to be the old me. Something sad sauntered through my chest, and the familiar lonely ache came back. "Why don't you ask Blake?" Dad said, an odd half-grin on his lips. He turned and winked at me. My arms are really tired. Was Dad setting me up? "Ask me what?" Blake asked. Look at him. Bright, innocent, happy. He has a life. He has a future. "Do you know if there are any wheelchairs around here?" "Dad's too tired to get back to the car," I asked. "I don't. Just a sec," Blake said, and pulled his phone out of his pocket. A second later, he got a text back. "Ask security. Don't forget to get his phone number." "Phone number?" I said. "The truth is, I came down to ask you out," Blake said. Somebody picked my jaw up off the floor and put it back on my face. Blake wanted to date me? That's not possible, is it? Something inside me panicked. I hadn't dated anybody since before Dad's accident. "Let's go ask security about a wheelchair," Blake said. In a second, he grabbed my hand and pulled me through the food court, across the mall, to the security booth. He held my hand. Should I be offended? Flattered? What was he doing? What was I doing? What if he asked me for a date? Should I say yes? That made the bit of panic inside my stomach get worse. I better say no. A part of me wished Blake would ask me out. We ran straight across the mall to the security booth. A man sat inside and looked up as we approached. He glanced at our hands. "Do you guys have a wheelchair?" Blake asked. He let go of my hand and whispered, "Sorry." "Who's the chair for?" the guard asked. "My dad. He had knee surgery and has trouble getting around," I said. "We don't have one down here right now," the guard said, "but we do have one upstairs by the department store." "I know where that one is," I said. I led the way. "Why did your dad need surgery?" Blake asked as we rode the elevator up to the second level. Dad was driving a forklift at work, tried to unload a pallet on the top shelf of storage, and hit one of the support bars. The whole thing fell, I said. "On his leg?" Blake asked. "More or less," I said. "Is his work paying for it? For the surgery, I mean?" Blake said. "Surgeries. And eventually they'll reimburse us for the medication and crutches and everything else," I said. At the other booth, we walked up to the security guard. "Are you the two looking for the wheelchair?" he asked. "I don't see one. Is it here?" I asked. "You should have called first. A woman had a bad fall, so we used it to escort her to the elevator and downstairs to the paramedics about 30 minutes ago," he said. "Where is it now?" "The bookstore by the main entrance," the guard said. We walked down the promenade toward the escalators. I caught a glimpse of Blake and me in one of the windows. How could he even stand to be seen with me? There he was, all smiles and cute and nice clothes and nice hair. There I was, frowning and depressed and unshaven and ripped clothes. "You going to college?" I asked. "History major. You?" Blake asked. "I was thinking about art, but I had to quit," I said. That made me sound like a loser. Art school dropout. "To take care of your dad?" he asked. I nodded. "What about your mom?" he asked. "Stepmom. She divorced my dad. It's just Dad and me," I said. "I don't blame Stepmom for ditching us 2 years ago. Dad had an affair. The lawyer Stepmom hired to represent her skewered Dad's finances," I said. "He's too busy being depressed to care anymore." For a moment, the pain hit. After my folks' divorce, Dad wanted out of that town. My Aunt Clara found him a job in Vegas, and it should have been a fresh start for everybody. I enrolled in college, found a job, had decent grades. Then the accident. I had to drop out of college to take care of Dad, and Stepmom was upset because she couldn't get any more free money from him, I said. The bill collectors demanded what little we had left. They even tried to garnish his wages, until they discovered he had none. We are so far behind on bills, it's amazing they haven't turned the electricity off. I don't date anymore. I don't have friends here in Vegas, and the ones back home stopped calling and texting. I don't go to college, can't afford to. I don't do anything but lift weights and play guitar and take care of my dad and go to work, I said. "It sounds lonely," Blake said. I needed to shift the conversation to something else because this one was depressing me. "You don't have to help me. You don't even know me. Why are you?" A small grin tickled the sides of Blake's mouth, and he said, "I'm building up the courage to ask you out to dinner." That wedge of panic in my gut blossomed. Look at Blake. He was perfect. Nice clothes with no rips and tears. He had friends hanging out with him. He even had money for a date. Blake reminded me of who I had been. "I don't think we're each other's type," I blurted out. Did I just say that? Am I trying to drive him away? The first guy in a year that's shown an interest in me? "As in you're straight and I'm gay?" Blake said. But he smiled, almost like it was a flirt. "No, that's not it," I said. My tongue seemed unable to form the words, and there was a tightness in my shoulders. "What is it?" Blake said. His voice held a hint of concern. So did his eyes. The emotion burst out of me. Look at me, then look at you. You look like you could go to a job interview or to church. Then I spread my arms so he got the full view of ragged me. I tilted my head and gave him a half smile. You look like you're going to a rave, Blake said. That brought back so many memories. Me and my old friends heading out to concerts or messing around. Back when I had friends. The memories were good. The times were the best. But there was no going back. I couldn't believe the bitterness inside me. My partying days are long gone. It's just Dad and me. Dad's on disability, and we were hoping that with all the surgeries, he'll start walking again. Doc didn't give him much of a chance, I said. For the first time in a year, I had someone to talk to. A stranger had wandered over, and I blubbered like a kid. We stopped walking, and I couldn't look at Blake. Sometimes I get so tired, I said. The store window had a nice jacket in it, similar to one I used to have years ago. Black, with a hood, lined with some kind of fur, and warm. I reached up and touched the glass in front of the jacket. It sounds hard, Blake said. You could say that, I said. Why am I even telling you? You have to promise. You can't mention any of this to anybody, especially my dad. I'm sorry to dump on you like this. When was the last time you had someone to talk to? Blake asked. I don't have anyone to talk to. It's just me and Dad. My Aunt Clara helped us get here 18 months ago, and all was starting to look good. Then the accident. I'm the only person Dad has. This was the worst way to make a good impression. I'm telling a total stranger my sob story. He'll think I'm pretty pathetic. I am pretty pathetic. What if he says anything about this to Dad? Some days, it can be really hard. Look, forget I said anything, okay? We found the wheelchair in front of the bookstore. A security guard waited with it. We took the wheelchair and walked back to the food court. Blake placed a hand on mine, his fingers curling a little around mine. Don't be alone, he said. I tried to keep from showing how much I hurt inside. I don't have a choice, I said. His friends had shown up at the food court, not too far away from Dad. Dad had taken the pain pill and had drunk half of the cola. We got him into the wheelchair, and then Blake and I took turns pushing Dad around the mall. We talked about little things. Dad told Blake about the accident. Blake told us about his classes. We talked about music, about different fashions in the windows, the weather, everything. It was fun talking to him. But it ended too soon. Dad began to droop, and his skin seemed grayer. I'm sorry about this, Blake. I need to get Dad home, I said. I should have asked for Blake's phone number, or asked if he wanted to go get coffee sometimes. Why would he want to do something like that with me? Look at my jeans, my shirt. Look at all the rips and tears. I wasn't worth it. Blake needed someone he could have fun with, not a tragedy case like me. We took Dad back to our 7-year-old car. It had dried poop on the hood, and it was dirty enough that I wrote "wash me" in one of the windows with my fingers. 6 all right? Blake said. 6 what? Dad said. 6 drinks? 6 hamburgers? $6? Oh no. Did using the wheelchair cost money? I'd spent the last of my money on Dad's medication. Raphael never said no, so is 6 all right? Or would 7 be better? Blake said. I never said no. To what? Did Blake still want to ask me out? He can't be serious. Me? I'm not worth going on a date with. Nobody would want to hang out with someone like me. Look at me. I don't have the clothes. I don't have the money. I don't have the looks. I'm pretty pathetic. I dropped out of college. Look at Blake. College, blonde, cute, nice clothes, probably had money. He's the kind of guy who probably has everything. Oh, God. Look at our car. It's a disaster on the inside. Papers and wrappers and old drink cups and old French fry containers. I hadn't cared about cleaning it up for months. Just a second, Blake. What are you talking about? Dad asked. He squirmed in the wheelchair. His leg must be hurting. Raphael never said no, so I'm assuming it's a yes, Blake said. Come on, Dad, let's get you in the car, I said. A little worm of panic ate through my stomach. Dad glanced at me with a slight nod and a slight smile. Okay, I'll admit it. Even though the thought of going out terrified me, a little teensy, tiny, itty-bitty, microscopic part of me was a little bit flattered. Still, why would Blake want to go out with me? You don't give up, I said. I would if you said no, Blake said, and then spoke to my dad. Sir, I am asking Raphael on a date. Tonight, all right? Nothing fancy. Dinner and maybe a walk. Payday isn't for 2 weeks. I can't believe him. You're asking me if you can take my son on a date? Dad asked. And the size of the grin on his face, the odd sidewards glance he gave me, and the odd way he chuckled, terrified me even more. Instead, I glanced at my jeans, at my shoes, at the wheelchair. I was a hopeless cause. But going out with Blake might be fun. Did you want to come chaperone? Blake said. Did he just smile at me? Dad chuckled. No, but I think you're right. Raphael, you need some time away from your old man. Dad shifted in his seat and rubbed his leg. What am I thinking? I can't leave Dad tonight. He had surgery a week ago and is still in pain. A date would be out of the question. Both Dad and I needed to face reality. I can't leave you alone, Dad. You've just had surgery and can barely walk, I said. Blake's eyes sparkled and he said, What if I brought Chinese takeout and we binge-watched videos at your place for a couple of hours? You can stay close in case your dad needs you, and you can still go on a date with me. Blake wouldn't give up. Dad smiled and almost laughed. Our house is just as messy as the car. If Blake came over, he would see the mess. He would see that we lived in a trashed-out mobile home. He would see that we were barely making it. He would see how depressed I had gotten. He would see that I had given up. I need an excuse. Dad's chair is in front of the TV. What do? I should say no, right now, and end this game. I should have said no a long time ago. But some part of me wanted to say yes. What if we had fun? What if for one night I could be a little like the person I used to be? What if I didn't have to be depressed tonight? We'll move the love seat over, Dad said. I could wash my jeans, find something clean to wear. I could stash a lot of stuff in my bedroom so the living room would be presentable. It means I'll have to clean the living room, I said, suppressing a smile. Was I happy? It had been a long time since I felt this way. Blake, 6 o'clock. I'll give you some money to help pay, Dad said, and handed some money to Blake. That was our grocery money. I can get my own dates, Dad. Stop arguing, Dad said, smiling. I gave Blake our address and my phone number and took a deep breath. Here goes. Once Dad was in the car and we drove away from the mall, I said, We don't get paid for weeks. Why did you do it? It's hard to explain, he said. What if Blake took the money and left? I said. He won't, Dad said. He pursed his lips and stared at me. You used to smile and go out and be with friends and have fun. You used to laugh and live. Remember that guy you dated, the guitarist with a little band called Negascream, a couple of years ago? You two never stopped smiling. I remember. His band went on tour and we drifted apart, I said. I bet it hurt. But you still smiled, Dad said. In those final days before the divorce, I counted on you to keep me going. You were so happy then. Life has changed, Dad, I said. I know. You've given up college, friends, almost everything that gave your life meaning just to help me. And what has it gotten you? You're depressed, you're too serious, you avoid people, you never go out, never have fun, Dad said. I want to see you smile again. Let me for one night help you. We'll worry about groceries tomorrow. It was a marathon cleanup session. I started the dishwasher, filled up a couple of trash bags of garbage. We hadn't gone to the laundromat for a while, so I bagged up the dirty clothes and hid them in the trunk of my car. Another load of dishes, more trash bags. I took load after load of stuff and hid it in my room. More trash. Each mobile home had a large black garbage can. I filled ours up and took more bags to a local dumpster. When had Dad and I collected so much garbage? A final load of dishes, a long vacuum session, and an air freshener. The place looked presentable, if no one looked into my room, or the closets, or under Dad's chair. Exhausted, I took one last glance. Dad sat in his chair, leg propped up. When was the last time the kitchen looked that clean? Probably the day before we moved in. "Hurry and jump in the shower," Dad said. For the first time in months, I was excited. Someone was coming over. I had a date. Halfway through my shower, my dad yelled the sweetest words I've heard in a long time. "Blake's here." It was like I was 5 years old again, and it was Christmas morning. I was out of the shower and dressed so fast I didn't dry my hair. Blake stood at the table, sorting through the various containers of takeout when he saw me, and nodded. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come. Did Dad scare you away yet?" I said. I was smiling. Blake had come here to see me. "The place looks good," Blake said. "Let's eat." "It should. Raphael spent hours cleaning," Dad said. An inner part of me chuckled and shouted and whooped for joy. Outside, I tried to maintain a semi-serious face. I pulled some plates from the cupboard, and we served up the best meal I've had in a long time. "This is heaven," Dad said. "Why don't we do Chinese more often?" "It's not on the way home," I muttered, between delicious bites of mushu pork and shrimp fried rice. My table manners were terrible tonight. My only consolation was that Dad and Blake ate just like me. It didn't matter. I was having fun. I can't believe Blake did all this. He caught me looking at him and reached over to my plate and snagged a shrimp. I leaned over and stole a piece of orange chicken from his plate. Were we flirting? I think so. That hasn't happened in a long time. "There's this new comedy I think you'd like," Blake said. Dad grinned at me. I pretended not to notice. "Open up. I've brought dinner," screamed a voice from the door. That could only be Aunt Clara? Here? Now? I glanced at Dad. By the dumbfounded look on his face, I don't think he knew she was coming over. "Can you believe someone parked in back of your car? There is no parking. I had to park 5 houses down, and these trays are heavy," Clara yelled. "That would be my car," Blake whispered. "Raphael, I know you're home. Get over here and open the door," Clara yelled again. "That's my aunt," I said, and ran to the door. I opened the door. Aunt Clara burst into the room wearing an odd mishmash of turquoise and floral and stripes. She shoved a couple of heavy casserole dishes at me. "Look at this place. Even though you've cleaned it up, it's still a mess," she squealed. "I swear it smells like old Chinese food. You know they put MSG in it, whatever that is. It's supposed to be bad for you." "Clara, meet Blake," Troy said. "Raphael's date. He brought Chinese takeout for dinner." Clara didn't even look at Blake as she marched to the counter. "You brought that stuff? It's overpriced, and it's nowhere close to authentic. And you know they put MSG in it, and so much oil. I brought you some real food." "Thanks, Aunt Clara. We'll have it tomorrow night," I said, setting the casserole dishes on the counter. "Tomorrow? You need to have it now while it's fresh," she said, her face turning a little red and her hands on her hips. "A couple of bachelors need a good, home-cooked meal." The first guy that showed an interest in me was watching. My aunt was a nice person, but came across as a freight train at times. I glanced at Blake. Would he walk out? I can't let my aunt drive him away. "Thanks, Aunt. This is Blake," I said, stepping over to him. "I'm on a date right now. He's already brought food." "Blake? A date? I only expected 2, Aunt Clara said, her voice shrill and her eyes narrowed to thin slits. "I didn't bring enough." "Wait a minute. You're dating again?" "First time in a year," my dad said. Aunt Clara took my seat and pushed my food to the middle of the table. She leaned on her elbows and stared at Blake as if he were some kind of a bug. "You're dating my nephew? Do you go to college? What kind of job do you have? Tell me about your family." "Is Clara trying to drive Blake away?" I looked at Dad for help. "Clara, settle down," Dad said. "I will not," Clara said. "You haven't had anybody in here for almost a year. I come over and somebody's suddenly here. Blake, are your parents divorced? I bet that's your car out there taking my spot. Do you own it, or are you leasing it?" "Aunt Clara," I said, "that's my date." "A date in your own living room?" she sneered. "How cute. What happens when Troy goes to sleep?" "Clara," my dad said, throwing his napkin on the table, "what is your problem?" Clara whirled on my dad. "I'm only trying to protect my brother and my nephew." I took a deep breath. My heart beat too fast. My hands sweated. I pushed my hair back. Clara was ruining my date. "How many times have you dated?" she demanded of Blake. "Aunt Clara," I said, trying to plead with my voice alone. "Have you two kissed? How much money do you make? What are your intentions with my nephew?" Clara blared. I squished my eyes shut and leaned back. This wasn't happening. My social life had just ended before it even began. I rapped my knuckles a couple of times on the chair, my appetite gone. Heat surged to my face, but my hands went cold. When I opened my eyes, Clara pointed at me. "Look at Raphael. He's wearing an old t-shirt and ripped jeans. Whose idea was it to bring Chinese takeout?" Clara said. "Aunt, please stop," I said, but it did no good. "That's not even close to romantic," Clara continued. "Clara, you've gone too far," Dad said. "You will apologize right now, or you can take your food and go home." Tonight was a disaster. This date was a disaster. Why had I even agreed to this? Because I dared to think that I could have some fun? I should have put Dad straight to bed, told Blake no, and never answered the door to my aunt. "Maybe we can answer one of the questions right now," Blake said, completely calm, but his eyes smiled mischievously. "I have a lot of questions," Clara said. "Clara, I don't need your attitude tonight," Dad said. While Dad and my aunt argued, Blake walked over to me. I wouldn't blame him for wanting to leave. It's what I would have done. "It's been a year since you've dated anyone, right?" Blake asked. "I've been taking care of Dad," I whispered. How could I tell him I didn't want him to go without sounding as worthless as I felt? "You shouldn't have had to do that," Dad said, his voice stained with a little bitterness. Aunt Clara quieted down. Blake took my hand and leaned in very close. "You did what you had to do. Let's have some fun and start this date right. I'm going to kiss you, but it will be the kind of kiss your aunt will freak over, and it might embarrass your dad. If that's okay, lick your lips." Blake wasn't leaving. He wanted to kiss me. I licked my lips. Our lips met. His were relaxed, mine stiff. I tried to relax, open my mouth a little, but our teeth bumped. "Sorry," I whispered. "It's okay. Ease into it," Blake said. We tried again. Blake was slow and romantic, but in my nervousness I kissed fast and furious. "Slow down. Enjoy the moment," Blake whispered. "I'm sorry I'm so bad at this," I said. "I don't mind," Blake said. We kissed again. I relaxed and slowed down, matching my mouth with his. My aunt yelped, "Would your mom approve of that?" We ignored her. Third try, I got it right. It was that kind of kiss that musicians sing about, slow and beautiful, a sharing. "Wow," I said, dazed, grinning. I let Blake pull me to the door. "Give you a little practice and you could be pretty good," Blake whispered. "Where are you two going?" Aunt Clara demanded. "Outside to get some privacy. It is our date," Blake said, and leaned over and kissed me. "What about dinner?" Clara said, hands on hips. "I don't think we're hungry right now," I said, as we left, holding hands. "We'll be back in a little while." This has to be the worst first date in the history of dates. I'm a bad kisser. My obnoxious aunt came over. I live in a run-down trash hole of a mobile home. And I'm a lonely mental case. For some reason, that didn't bother Blake. We talked about movies and college and any crazy thing we could think of. I told him about Dad's treatments, about my old life. Blake was easy to talk to, and he let me talk. Somewhere in the walk, we started holding hands. One of my neighbors had celebrated a birthday with music and some dancing. They didn't mind when Blake and I joined them, or the dance. I think whoever was in charge of the music arranged a few slow dances, just for us. "Thanks," I said close to Blake's ear. "This has been the best night I've had for a long time." "You're welcome," Blake said. We took our time walking back, still holding hands. The sunset was orange and gold, and the clouds had turned dusky orange with gold edges. Blake let go of my hand and pulled my arm around him. "Is it an omen?" he asked. We kissed in front of my old home for several minutes. I think I'd gotten better because Blake only gave me one pointer. "It's even better when no one's around," he whispered. Aunt Clara had made cookies and left a minute after we returned. I helped Dad to bed, then joined Blake in the love seat to watch movies. Well, Blake watched movies. I fell asleep on his shoulder. When I woke, he had his arm around me and was watching some zombie flick while munching on cookies. "Sorry, did I miss anything?" I said. "Not at all. I like having a sexy guy sleeping on my shoulder," Blake said. Blake came over almost every weekend, and he came with me for many of Dad's therapies. We grew close. Because of him, I found a friend, someone I could talk to, someone who could help me get through the tough times. I became happy again. The golden sunset was an omen. A year later, Dad walked me down the aisle to the most caring and beautiful man I'd ever met. The man who brought me back to life. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I appreciate it. The companion story is called The Bet. It's all about Blake's point of view. I'll see you next time. Peace.